in the Bible, both in the Old and the New Testament, it doesn't say you shouldn't date somebody that's not a Christian. You know why? Because there's nothing in the Bible about dating. It wasn't invented. I mean, you know, I always, for years, I heard people speak to youth groups saying the biblical view of dating. And I used to say, well, that should be the shortest talk in history, because there's nothing in the Bible about dating. And I've had people say, well, you know, you shouldn't date a non-Christian if you're a Christian. And the only reason I'm always afraid of, on the one hand, I'm afraid of saying, I mean, that is a pretty good example of trying to be safe, but really going beyond the Scripture. But now you begin to see, here's the problem. If you get to the place where you'd like to marry somebody, but that person doesn't share your commitment to Christ, now you're beginning to see the problem, why you really can't go forward. And the reason you can't go forward is this. When the other person says, oh, I don't mind you practicing your religion. I'm not going to try to keep you from your religion. But I just don't have your religion. Now what that means is the person looks into your heart and sees the thing that's the most important thing in the world to you, and she doesn't get it. And what that means is ultimately a loss of intimacy. See, right now you feel like, well, we're really close. But I mean, if you're talking about somebody who looks at what really turns your crank, what really is your very heart, and doesn't understand it, that means she doesn't really understand you. It doesn't matter how many other things you have in common. It doesn't matter about the kind of romantic chemistry. You see, when you're young, the romantic chemistry and the mutual interests and so on can kind of mask the fact that at heart she doesn't understand you. And if she doesn't understand you, that means in the long run, there's only two things you can do. You can get intimate with her by putting God on the outskirts of your life and putting her in the center, or else you can keep God in the center of your life and then she'll go to the outskirts. Doesn't mean you can't have a fairly okay marriage. The reason the Bible appeals to you not to marry somebody who you know doesn't have the same belief system is because it will be one or the other. It doesn't mean you'll stop being a Christian. But the point is you're not going to be able to talk and think God-centeredly with your spouse. Are you following me on this? You just won't be able to. You know, in other words, you'll have a reason to do something and it's based on God, but you can't say something because she's going to roll her eyes. And so what you end up having to do is sort of having to, you know, it doesn't mean you stop being a Christian, but you push him out of downtown out into the suburbs. I mean, instead of being in the center of your life, you push him out. So either if you want to share your heart of hearts with your wife all the time, you're going to have to sort of you're going to have to make God a little less important. Otherwise, your wife is just going to be bummed out. So either God goes to the suburbs and your wife lives downtown and she's the one you're most intimate with, or God stays the person you're most intimate with and then she ends up being somebody you're really not. She goes to the suburbs. You following me? And that's the reason why you're stuck. I think the most merciful thing is to lay out something along the lines of what I said. You've got to try to be articulate about it. You know, you can't just say, you don't have my beliefs. I mean, that just sounds narrow-minded. If I were you, I would try to explain it like I did, which is to say, let's be practical. Let's be practical. If 9 times out of 10, when I'm making a major decision, I'm thinking about God, and you wouldn't even understand that, that means that when we come to make decisions together, I'm going to have to hide from you the most important thing in my life. And you don't want that. So you have to say, now, either you start moving toward the same belief I have, or we're we're just not going to be able to go forward in our relationship. Okay, that's what you have to do. Don't just say, you don't have my beliefs. I mean, that sounds to her simply like, well, you have to sign on the dotted line. That's a little bit like, you know, this sounds stupid. I mean, my uncle's, he's very old now, my uncle's parents were from Italy, and they could cook Italian. And my aunt's parents were not from Italy, and she couldn't cook Italian. I said, well, you can't get married unless you learn to cook everything my mother can cook. And my aunt said, okay. And a lot of women would say, you know, right. You know, don't you want me? I mean, this is years ago. They're in their 80s, and you know, we're talking about first, second generation Italians, and you know, today a woman might say, "Who do you think you are?" and so forth. And in a way, when you say that to a woman, you have to have my beliefs. She might say, "Why?" That's partly because she doesn't understand how belief in God is integrated in your life. So what you'd have to do is basically say, either I'm going to have to not really share you my heart when we get married, or else you're going to have to start to move to understand it one way or the other. So that's what you have to do. I don't envy you. It's going to be very hard. On the other hand, to not do it will be harder. So you've got two alternatives. One is hard and one is impossible. So I suggest the hard one. Okay. Sorry. This is what I was trying not to do with you. I was trying to say, let's not get into all the intimate details. Yeah, just you and me and these 100 people here listening. I'm sorry about that, but I appreciate the candor of your question. It's a very important one.